everyone, welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. Joining me again this time around is my good friend Jarvis Gray. Jarvis, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Jesse. It's good to be back again.
So this time, we are talking about the recently shut down TV channel G4 Canada, which just finally came to an end. It was discontinued on September 1st of 2017. For some people, the fact that this station was even still around is likely going to come as a huge surprise, since even though it has been technically running on television, still for about 3 or 4 years past the shutdown of its American counterpart back in 2014, you could argue it's been kind of just a zombie hanging around on Canadian TV for no apparent reason. That said, it's the G4 Canada, which was owned by Rogers, was a very interesting channel because it characterized a lot of the unique issues, I would say, with Canadian media. And Jarvis, I understand it's a channel that you were a big fan of for many years as well.
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of it back in the day when it was TechTV, and I would like to pour one out for that. I had to get that from the fridge, especially. Nice cold can of mug root beer, in fact. And I'm pouring this out more for TechTV than for G4. You know,
important distinction. Very important distinction.
Yeah, TechTV was fantastic for the time. G4, not so much.
Yeah, and they were ZDTV before that as well, right?
Yeah, but that was pretty short-lived, and it was mostly ran episodes of CNET TV, I think, at the time.
Yeah, it's a channel with a very interesting history, and they incorporated a lot of things over the years and transformed in a lot of ways. But, the reason we're talking about it is because they ran anime back in the late 2000s, specifically between late 2006 and very early 2008. It was a very brief period, but nonetheless, it was a really big deal. It sort of encapsulated this brief era where it seemed like anime was showing up on a whole bunch of different networks and was a very prominent presence on Canadian TV. But for a variety of reasons, the G4, specifically the G4 Tech TV anime lineup on Canadian TV continues to be one of the most strongly remembered.
Oh, well, it was certainly a glorious time to be watching anime on TV when you're like me in 2007 and stuck with dial-up connection.
Yeah, that would have been a really big deal for you, especially because we're talking about an era where a lot of people, even people in urban areas, didn't necessarily have access to high speed, and things like online streaming hadn't really taken off, legal or otherwise at that point. So if buying physical media or torrenting anime wasn't an option for you, then having broadcast television, as weird as it seems to say this now, having access to anime on television was not just like a luxury or a symbol of cultural importance, but it had a real practical value to a lot of people.
Oh yeah, and I give thanks to that G4 anime block for probably giving rise to my love of Genion's old back catalog. It's sort of a long-held dream of mine to watch every anime that Genion ever put out dubbed in North America. Probably about 70% of the way to completing that dream.
And that's something we can definitely talk about a little later in the show. But if this isn't an issue you're particularly familiar with, you might wonder why exactly anime showed up on this station. So G4, as we, I guess, knew it, it was actually a combination of G4 TV and Tech TV, as we touched on before. For the stretch of time that anime aired, it was known as G4 Tech TV. The whole time the station was owned by Rogers, from I think the time it was created as ZDTV to the time that it died as G4 Canada. But all these different changes in branding that took place was all in accordance to the often violent transformations that station went through in the United States. And the anime actually started airing on the American version of the original Tech TV network back in late 2002. It was on a program on Tech TV. I guess it was Attack of the Show or something else, where they were talking about Fooly Cooly, which had just started airing on Adult Swim in the U.S. And there they alluded to the fact that Tech TV was going to be launching their own anime block on the station, which turned out to be Anime Unleashed. that started just a few months later. And that featured a variety of shows from both Genion and ADV films, including stuff like Serial Experiments Lane, Crest of the Stars, and Razafon. And this was a really big deal because, we had some stuff in Canada like Teletoon's Late Night Anime, which had run in the late 90s. And, stuff had shown up on, like, Space and in the US, the Sci-Fi Network before. But on the Sci-Fi Network, the anime they ran in the States was usually edited and on Saturday mornings and kind of not really targeted at kids, but sort of, the only way the mentality seemed to be that the only way they could get the stuff on the air is if they kind of made it look like Saturday morning cartoons, even though they, the content clearly wasn't in line with that. But G4 TechTV, or the TechTV Anime Unleashed block was sort of the second attempt in which we saw a network trying to run an adult-oriented block, which I guess in a way kind of validated the concept of airing anime on TV outside of a children's television context. And of course, that really got Canadian fans into a tizzy, because we got a version of TechTV, but of course it wasn't going to have the anime that we wanted so badly. And this was also that frustrating period after Gundam Wing had ended on YTV, but before Bionics had ended. So when we were seeing all this stuff airing on Toonami and Adult Swim, and now TechTV, and there's just, none of it is washing up in the equivalent networks in Canada. And that created a lot of demand to get anime up here on the airwaves. And interestingly, the Canadian version of TechTV saw this as an opportunity to branch out, because one of the main reasons there was no anime on the airwaves, apart from the fact that I don't think there were any really big anime fans running the programming at TechTV, but because they weren't able to due to regulation. Do you remember that whole sort of situation, Jarvis?
I'm not sure about the regulation part, but I do know, it doesn't count as Canadian content, therefore it's verboten.
Oh, I'm rubbing my hands on this one. Okay, so
yeah, this is your area of expertise.
Yeah. So this kind of goes to the popular conception of the difference between U.S. and Canadian channels. U.S. channels are seen as a fire hose of unrestrained entertainment, while Canadian stations are often seen as simply a series of regulatory workarounds. I feel that both of those assessments are only partially true, but it kind of makes sense when you look at TechTV. So back in like the late 90s and early 2000s, when we started to get all these specialty channels, from a regulatory standpoint, they were created under the idea of genre protection. And the idea was that none of these stations would actually compete with each other. Each one would be allowed to focus on a certain genre or topic or area, and with the idea that if they have a total monopoly on that area, that they would be able to create Canadian content and get it on the air and kind of cover every base. A lot of times you got original channels that focused on an area, like Teletoon was a unique Canadian brand. In the case of TechTV, we did get a U.S. branded station, but it got the designation of tech and sort of tech and information-based programming, which is kind of weird because that's not really a genre. But as much as we like to regale in how wonderful the old TechTV days are, it's kind of weird today to think of a station like TechTV working, because tech isn't even really a niche anymore, or you can't even pin that down as a genre like you might have been able to back in the early 2000s, which is kind of makes me wonder how that station would have played out if they had never merged with G4.
Well, the internet certainly would have killed it at some point, but it would have lasted much, much longer. And TechTV truly was a channel ahead of its time. I mean, it was where I went to get all my reviews of big, chunky laptops that I was never going to, in a million years, could even dream of owning.
What use is the internet if you can't devote time to talking about it on TV, though? But TechTV had this designation as being like a tech internet computer-based channel, but according to their license, they could not air any entertainment programming, or the types of entertainment programming that they could run was extremely limited. Certainly not a large enough scope to allow something like anime without getting penalized. And this, of course,
we certainly had things like X-Play, and I found that more than entertaining.
Well, scripted content was the big emphasis here, and that's because, as we have since discovered, the natural impetus of any kind of specialty channel is to stray away from the specific genre that it was originally created to cater towards and dive into more general programming, and so that they could broaden their audience rather than focus on specific niche audiences and potentially gain more ad revenue or gain more money from subscribers, which is really the game when it comes to Canadian specialty channels. Because those channels don't really make that much money from, or the money that those channels make from advertising is pretty negligible. It's all about the subscriber fees and the money that is made by bundling those channels with other channels and feeding off of those subscription fees that people don't necessarily want to pay. Which and it's probably worth mentioning that our recent transition to pick and pay television, where people can pick any station they want a la carte, rather than having to subscribe to large packages with lots of stations they don't want, have made stations that don't really have any viable content anymore, like G4 Canada, unsustainable. But this was long before that development, and still in a time when some hopelessly clung to the idea that you could keep certain genres restrained, or you could keep individual specialty channels restrained to individual genres or topics. And they fought and fought and fought to get that change made, and it took them until late 2006 to finally get that into play. And to put that into perspective, Anime Unleashed started in 2002. By the time G4 TechTV had the go-ahead to run scripted content in Canada, the tables had kind of turned on the US station. By that time, Comcast had purchased TechTV, and it had been fully subsumed by their video game-oriented channel G4. The people who ran the anime block had basically been fired at that point, and the block as a whole was on its way out. It was an interesting time because at this key moment, it seemed like the Canadian station was desperate to get anime on the air, while the U.S. station was desperate to get rid of it. And in almost every way, the Canadian version of G4 Tech TV felt like it was retaining the integrity of the old Tech TV, whereas it felt the U.S. version had just completely abandoned it. And it just shows how in those 4 years, things had really rapidly changed with the way specialty channels were going, and G4 is certainly one of the most interesting cases of that.
This is all completely new to me. At the time, I would have just been like in my late teens, completely oblivious to most of this going on.
I think that it was this desire to get exposure for anime that sucked a lot of Canadian fans into the world of broadcast and media regulation. Again, it goes back to that idea that we tend to see Canadian stations as like a collection of sort of regulatory workarounds, and I think people who are really focused on fandom and the spread of culture and things like that through media in Canada have kind of developed that sense. I can't speak for everyone though. But nonetheless, they finally got the go-ahead to run anime on G4 Tech TV Canada in December of 2006. Unlike Anime Unleashed from 4 years before, they only managed to strike an exclusive deal with Genion. And ADV Films was not a part of this block, unfortunately. And they ran all the shows at 8 p.m.
They couldn't have picked a better show to launch with. At the time that it launched, I had just finished watching the Read or Die OVA series.
Yes.
Which was easy for me to download at the time, being on dial-up, because it was only, 3 or 4 episodes?
It was 3 episodes.
Yep. Perfect size for dial-up. And I just happened to be scrolling through the TV at the time, and I see something called ROD, the TV. And I'm thinking, ROD, that looks an awful lot like Read or Die, but there's no way there's a Read or Die TV show. And I click on it.
Oh, you didn't even know about the TV show at that point.
No, I did not even know at the time there was a TV show. I was, still very new. I'd only just really started picking up anime about a year before that through torrents. And I see that, my mind is blown, and every single day after that, I'm obsessed with, catching the weekday episodes and then almost always rewatching them when they reran them on the weekends, all the way up until the very last episode.
Yeah, and the last episode was really interesting because it's a full 30 minutes long, and actually when that show aired on Anime Unleashed in the States back in like 2002, 2003, they actually hacked it up to fit in commercial breaks. But G4 TechTV Canada, they were provided with two different versions, the hacked up version that aired on TechTV in the States, and the uncut version, and they just showed the uncut version but with no advertising, which was a really cool move. I think I think it was a great way to show that they were committed to trying to make this work and to make fans happy. It also was a strong indicator that for a lot of stations that have lower viewership like G4 Tech TV, that the advertising isn't always as important as getting that subscriber revenue. And if I recall correctly, Tech TV or G4 Tech TV, most of the ads that they ran were usually for Rogers-based things, since they were run by Rogers.
Yeah, and Rogers was kind of a non-entity in my area.
Yeah.
We're a TELUS town up here.
Yeah. It's still funny how they'll fill the time that way. And Read or Die I think was an interesting one to start on for a lot of people because they actually kept things like nudity in the show, which I think a lot of people weren't actually expecting.
Yeah, episode 5. Big old titties.
Yeah.
Was not expecting that.
They ran it every day at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I guess it would have been it was 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and then 5:30 p.m. Pacific, and they blasted through it, and then they would devote a lot of time on the weekends to running through all the episodes they had run that week as well. So I mean, it was well covered in the schedule, and they devoted a lot of time to making sure people could catch it.
Oh yeah, and I was certainly tuning in because, like I said, being with dial-up internet, the only easy way to get my daily fix was catching it at 5:30.
So yeah, it was interesting because they started running Read or Die the TV almost exactly the same time that Razor, which was run by the fledgling Chum at the time, started running anime as well. They started showing a bunch of stuff from Funimation, including...
I was wondering when you were going to bring Razor into this.
Yeah, well, it's just so funny because TechTV fought so long to get their license amended so they could run anime and be like... Or to be the big anime broadcaster in Canada, and in that time, both YTV and Razor swooped in and started their own blocks, with Razor just beating them to the punch by, I think, weeks, when they started running Basilisk and Trinity Blood and a few other shows. And later in the year, Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo, which, in my opinion, basically means that Razor had the better lineup overall. But yeah,
ooh, I don't know, man. Ooh. Trinity Blood, it takes a hit just for that.
Yeah, fair enough. But nonetheless, Tech TV had a better they had a better strategy for unveiling their anime because they had enough time to think about it, of course. And I think that's a big reason why that block is better remembered. And I'm always surprised by the number of people I run into who remember the block or follow the block, because it obviously doesn't get as much attention as something like Bionics. But I'm surprised it stuck with people so much over the years.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I'm looking as part of my notes here, the Wikipedia page for Anime Current, and taking an interesting note of it. It seems much better curated than the American segment for Anime Unleashed.
You mean the Wikipedia page itself?
Yeah, the Anime Unleashed one can't even be bothered to list the shows in the order that they aired.
Jarvis, it is worth noting, though, that Anime Current page on Wikipedia is not an accurate source of information. Somebody went in there, or a few people went in there, and they added a whole bunch of shows that never aired. In fact, this is a trend that
I had a feeling. I can tell. I will tell you right now, without looking, which ones were added.
Yeah, and just so you know, I removed a few of them a couple years ago. Someone had added Wolf's Rain and Fooly Cooly and a couple others on there. It's funny that people, insist on that kind of revisionist history all the time. I've seen this happen on other Wikipedia pages as well. It's almost like people are writing fan fiction about how they think the block should have went.
I was gonna say, is this the whole like Sinbad was in Kazam thing all over again?
It's Shazam, Jarvis.
Ah, shit! There goes my '90s cred. No, just looking at this list, I can tell they never aired Le Portrait de Petite Cosette.
They did not.
No way was that ever in that channel block.
No. But when the ROD the TV did finish, they followed that up with Gadgard.
That's one of the few shows in the block that I watched about half of it, and then something about that show just did not click with me, and it just slipped out of my brain. I've always meant to go back and finish it, start to finish, just to round out the list.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm much more interested in the next show that they aired.
Tenjo Tenge?
Absolutely. I enjoyed it right up into the part that it kind of went up its own ass in a never-ending flashback.
That flashback took up most of the show, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
And I was like, when are they gonna get to the fireworks factory? For pretty much the entire run, I was like, okay, that's nice. That's nice. Okay, can we get to the fight after the bowling alley? Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah. It adapted a very small part of the actual manga from what I recall.
Yeah. And it had I remember distinctly having a very kind of nothing ending that was resolved in later OAV.
I'm not. I think I got an OVA or OAV at some point. Did the manga ever really conclude?
I think it eventually did. I would have to check Baka updates for that.
Well, I mean, Viz put it out too.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, there was that whole debacle when CMX was releasing the manga, and they, for some reason, insisted on censoring it down to like a 13+ level, which was one of the many signs that company was not really in touch with what people wanted. But Viz of all people actually wound up relicensing it, and they're releasing those big double volumes. I think those are still coming out right now.
Oh it wrapped up in 22 volumes.
Oh, okay. The next show that aired after Tenjo Tenge was Gunsword. And now I never watched Gunsword, but I do remember the first time I went to Sakura-Con back in 2006. This show was everywhere. This was one of those shows that desperately wanted to be the next Cowboy Bebop on American TV and was like pushed to be that type of show, but never actually really wound up on a station that anybody got. But it did show up on TechTV Canada.
Oh, and what a glorious show it was from the peerless mind of Goro Taniguchi, who I will say very controversial thing now is I think Goro Taniguchi is a better director than Hayao Miyazaki.
It really depends on what you're looking for.
I'm looking for the serious and I'm looking for the silly, and that man can deliver both in spades.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with him, he did go on to direct Code Geass just a few years later.
Absolutely, and Planets.
Oh yeah, he did do that, didn't he? He also did I think he did Scryed too, which is Scryed is one that showed up on Adult Swim but never made it up to TV here.
No, he did Scryed. He also did Infinite Rivius, which is another show I quite enjoy.
Oh, he did Maria the Virgin Witch too.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a great show. That was a great show.
Yeah, he also did Active Raid, which is a show I don't hear anybody talking about, unfortunately.
I made it about 2 episodes into that one. It has very pretty character designs. I didn't really see much else going on there. But granted, I guess at 2 episodes I didn't really give it a fair chance.
Yeah, he's a guy that, considering, what he's done, I don't know how he isn't just neck deep in work.
I'm sure he has something in the pipeline we're going to be seeing soon. I don't know what, but probably something.
Yeah. So after Gunsword was another big one, Trigun.
Trigun. Yeah. This is one that I think arrived on TV a little too late. I don't know. Trigun's it's a fun show, and it has a really great dub. I think we all love Johnny Young Bosch and premiere performance as Vash the Stampede. And especially the early episodes are a lot of fun. I don't think it really is quite the A title that people saw it as back in the day, though.
Well, the truly good things will stick around, and everything else will get sorted out.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trigun has endured. It has endured quite a bit. We got the movie a few years ago, and I actually like the movie a lot better than the series, mainly because I found that it captured the Trigun that we remember rather than the Trigun that actually was. Or at least it captured the elements of the show that I liked, and with much better animation.
Well, it's certainly stuck around in some people's minds. My sister just got a bunny rabbit a couple of weeks ago, and she immediately wanted to call it Vash.
It's a good name for a bunny.
We talked her down. We talked her down from that cliff.
What did she wind up naming the bunny?
Oh, Bueno, I believe.
Oh. I recall also when Trigun was running on G4, it had a lot of weird aspect ratio problems. They couldn't seem to just air it in the proper 4:3. It was crunched down into widescreen and window boxed.
Perhaps you could answer this for me, because at the time I didn't watch it because I'd already seen it on a torrent.
Yeah.
But did they do the thing that the DVDs did where it only had the one opening?
I believe it only had the one opening. I think...
Okay.
Yeah.
Must be because they were probably working from those DVDs.
Yeah. I think... I don't know. I know that... I think there was one release of Trigun where they actually restored the opening so that it showed like the different villain of the week in the opening for each episode. I'm not sure which release that was. I can't remember if it was that release came out of Genion or Funimation. I think it may have been like the very last.
If I had to guess, I would imagine it was probably Funimation.
Yeah, maybe.
I doubt Genion would give a crap enough to go back.
Really, I think that Funimation is like the worst when it comes to preserving credits and stuff like that. But it's really a case-by-case kind of thing, which, suggests a quality control issue.
It's a question of would Genion at the time have had the money to do it.
Yeah, that's another thing that's probably worth pointing out is what I mentioned that...
we'll get to what happened to Genion. It's coming.
Yeah. And it's also worth pointing out, I know the block that ran on G4 Tech TV was called Anime Current. That actually hadn't started yet. The shows that we're discussing right now aired before that branding showed up. And there was one other show that aired before they made the switch over to Anime Current, where they changed up the lineup a bit. So instead of doing one show at a time, they would run multiple shows across different days. And that show was Lupin the Third. Now it's worth pointing out, this was the second series of Lupin the Third, the one that
Red
Jacket Lupin. It aired on Adult Swim a few years before this broadcast, and the Canadian broadcast actually aired more of it. I think that the American broadcast cut off at episode 26 because it did not really do well in the ratings. And Lupin the Third on Canadian TV also did not do very well in the ratings, but they actually licensed 52 episodes of it for G4 Tech TV, and they actually aired all of it. They stuck by it and ran through the whole thing, which was pretty cool.
Well, if you paid for it, you better stick by it.
There's a bit of a funny story behind that. So I know that when they were running, the people who were running the anime lineup on G4 Tech TV, they were not super knowledgeable about anime, and the reason I know that is because I was actually regularly in contact with the head of programming at G4 at the time, who was Hayden Mindell. I called him on the phone like once every other week or a couple times a month or something, because I was a huge nerd who had nothing better to do. And he's actually now the vice president of television programming for Rogers as a whole. Actually, maybe I actually still have him on LinkedIn. Maybe I should have gotten him to come on this show, and he could have shared more insight. I doubt he'd have time with a position like that. But in any case, he would often ask me questions just kind of as reassurance that they had made good programming decisions a lot of the time. And he actually asked me at one time if I thought that Lupin the Third was a good choice to show, and I told him that I liked Lupin the Third a lot, but it probably wouldn't be a good idea to air 52 episodes of it, because I don't think that audiences would really, or more general audiences would really be taken by it. And it didn't work out too well, and it's a big reason why after Lupin the Third ended, they kind of re-strategized and created a new branded block that presented shows in a different format. Did you catch all of Lupin on G4?
Oh, I can assure you, I tuned in like a rabid dog every day for Lupin the Third, and which is surprising considering it was my first exposure to it. I'd always known about Lupin, but again, dial-up internet torrents wasn't very easy in 2007 to get, subtitled episodes of Lupin the Third. So to be able to get, 26 episodes dubbed, absolutely I tuned in to watch that.
Yeah, what's your opinion of the Lupin the Third dub? They punched it up a lot with modern references, despite the fact that it was a show very clearly of the 1970s, and I'm almost certain that was a mandate by TMS. I often get the impression that they think they know better about appealing to American audiences than Western distributors do.
Well, it's certainly my favorite dub for Lupin the Third. I really enjoyed, Tony Oliver as Lupin and Richard Epcar as Jigen.
Yeah, it's the best cast for sure, and I'm glad they brought them back for Part 4.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to watch the Lupin the Third Part 4 dub, it is on Funimation.com.
All right. Well, tell me what else is on the list. Now that I know that I can't trust the list in front of me, I've got to go by what you've got.
I sent you another list that has all the stuff that I know for sure ran.
Oh, that list.
Yeah.
Oh, right then.
After Lupin the Third ended, I think, if I recall correctly, there was a bit of a hiatus. But anime returned shortly after, under the block, which was branded as Anime Current. They put some slick ads together. I think there weren't a lot of them, and they ran the few that they made over and over again.
I know. That's how I saw that same shot of the woman from Ergo Proxy holding that shotgun at arm's length over and over and over again.
It's such a good shot, though. I mean, how can you not use that one? But yeah, I mean, it was a they put effort into it. It was a pretty slick presentation. And they started with 5 different shows which ran different days of the week. They had Ergo Proxy was one of them, of course. And Ergo Proxy is an interesting show. It's actually Ergo Proxy was directed by the same director as Witch Hunter Robin, who is Shuko Murase, and it was written by Dai Sato, and it is like the most Dai Sato
Witch Hunter
thing.
Robin, also a show we got on YTV.
Yes, that was what's neat about Witch Hunter Robin on YTV is that I think it had a bigger impact here than it did in the States, because it was the first kind of show of its kind that we saw run on a station like YTV, and I think it made a strong impression on people. I don't know if how much of that interest carried over to G4 Tech TV's airing of Ergo Proxy, because for all its problems, Witch Hunter Robin is a fairly accessible show. Ergo Proxy was marketed like
I don't know about that. I didn't get into Witch Hunter Robin until I got the box set, because I tried catching a random episode of it on YTV and couldn't get my bearings at all.
Relatively accessible. Whereas you have something like Ergo Proxy, which on the surface is marketed like a very accessible show, but it is not. It is not accessible at all. I found it to be a real slog when I watched through it the first time, and I mean the animation quality just nosedives basically from episode 2. The thing that always bothered me about this show was how Vincent, who is like effectively, perhaps even he's probably more the main character than Riel was in that show, and he shows up in episode 2, but by episode 2 the animation quality had dropped so much that when Vincent is introduced, he's not on model. We're not introduced to an on model version of the character. In fact, I think it's not until almost the end of the series that we actually see Vincent the way he's supposed to look. So, I mean, it's a pretty janky production.
Well, they got to save all that budget for Riel's makeup.
Yeah. This is very much an episode where, in terms of animation quality, all of the resources went into the first and last episodes. Most of the show is philosophical navel-gazing. They made, like, also weird sci-fi references to things like Douglas Copeland books, which I'm kind of curious. I would be kind of curious to go back and watch the show again to see if, now that I am an MA graduate and understand, I guess, a lot of this type of stuff better, to see if I get more out of the show the second time around. I still think a lot of its pacing problems are unforgivable. But it's an interesting show for sure.
No, certainly. And if there's one thing anime likes to do, it's reference, deep cut Western sci-fi authors.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Cordwainer Smith.
So what are your thoughts on Last Exile, which was another one of the shows that kicked off Anime Current?
I think Last Exile was actually the fourth show I ever torrented, and I got a lot of love for it. Got a lot of love for Gonzo Studio in general, even though most of their shows get pretty much panned by everybody.
I think Last Exile was one of their most well-received shows. I mean, it's a real slick production. I still feel that it kind of falls into that trap that you see a lot of shows in the early 2000s falling into, where they get so wrapped up in things like aesthetics or
world building.
Yeah, in aesthetics and world building that they just don't. There's just no attention is given to actually making the show kinetic or engaging, or really well paced at all. It seemed like those were just not priorities for so many shows in the 2000s, especially a lot of the Genion titles. And Last Exile was better than a lot of those types of shows, and the production qualities were really great and it held itself together. But I really found it hard to stay interested in it for most of the run.
But it was so worth it when that Captain Harlock stand-in guy broke that woman's neck with one hand at the end.
Oh yeah, the guy that Crispin Freeman played, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I remember when I watched it subtitled and I hadn't heard the dub, but when I saw that character, my reaction was, I'll bet Crispin Freeman plays this guy in the dub, and he totally did. One of the other shows that kicked it off was, in my opinion, the best show that aired on G4 Tech TV, and one of my favorite anime TV shows of all time, Paranoia Agent. And, I am so happy that G4 Tech TV picked up anime, if only so they could expose this show to a bigger audience. I do understand from what I've heard from various interviews with people at Genion that airing Paranoia Agent on television in the States, in the US and Canada, never actually did anything to improve disc sales, which is incredibly depressing. I mean, those discs eventually sold, which we know based on how expensive those sets are now, since Satoshi Kon tragically passed away back in 2010.
Well, it's easy to sell out of discs when you only make one printing.
Yeah, and Paranoia Agent, one of the few shows from Genion that's still not license rescued and still in limbo.
Yeah, I wonder about that. That's got to come to Blu-ray eventually, sometime.
I bet someone's sitting on it. It almost feels like someone just snatched up all the Satoshi Kon stuff that was available and is just sitting on it now and won't let anyone else have it, which is infuriating. This stuff should be available for people to buy. But man, Paranoia Agent is an amazing show, and it holds up fantastically. I can't think of very many other anime TV series that blend a sort of cinematic approach with real hard social commentary that doesn't have this veneer of just anime goofiness.
I don't know. I think if it did at times, but it used it more like a scalpel.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, for sure. This show also had some technical problems when it was running on G4 Tech TV as well. There's one episode, Happy Family Planning.
Is that the one where they're ghosts?
Well, I mean, that's a spoiler, but it's about the three people who are trying to commit suicide throughout the episode, and they meet on the internet and have a suicide pact, and then it turns out at the end that they had already died at a certain point. It's a really interesting episode, and it plays more into the overall theme of the show than you might expect, because it kind of sets up that idea that there's a collective conscious among people in the series. even though it initially comes off as a total filler episode. But there's numerous scenes with people posting in the forums and texting each other, and all that on-screen text is untranslated in the version that aired on G4 Tech TV. I know there was a similar problem when it ran on Adult Swim, but I know in the repeats they managed to get a version that had all that text subtitled, but G4 Tech TV never did. So that's really unfortunate that the one airing of Paranoia Agent in Canada was kind of undermined by a problem like that. But still awesome that it showed up. I hope at least I hope some people discovered the show through that airing.
Well, I certainly found it, although I think I downloaded it by that time. And funny enough, my sister, I showed it to her. She would have been like 12 or 13 at the time, and it affected her enough that she actually went for Halloween as Little Slugger.
Oh, nice. I approve.
Yeah, she got some rollerblades, she got a red hat, and she spray painted a wooden baseball bat gold colored.
I am so happy to hear that. That's like that's awesome.
Yeah, she did not give a shit that absolutely no one would get it, but just purely for her own enjoyment.
Good stuff. So another show that kicked off the block was Serial Experiments Lain, which is definitely a show that was simultaneously ahead of its time, but also extremely dated in a number of ways. It's interesting. One reason we had to delay recording this episode was because the final episode of the new Twin Peaks series just aired last Sunday, and it completely fried my brain. It was almost impossible to focus on doing an episode like this of the podcast with that at the front of my mind. But through a lot of that show, I couldn't help but feel how similar it was to a show like Lain. The character of Philip Jeffries, in particular, he's the character who was played by David Bowie in the Twin Peaks movie, but David Bowie died before he was able to film his scenes in the new series, so they just depicted him as a giant tea kettle. But if you've seen the Twin Peaks movie and the new series, I really feel that Philip Jeffries feels like a character who is straight out of Serial Experiments Lain, which is appropriate because Serial Experiments Lain is definitely a show that was one of those late 90s, early 2000s anime that was very clearly influenced by Twin Peaks. It's just it's so weirdly subversive, not just in the way it deals with technology, but just in the way it deals with, scripted television in general.
Yeah, it's a show I've seen twice, both of them with the dub. I think I could give a pretty good, summation to somebody who'd never seen it before. But it's been 10 years now since I last saw it, and, it takes a bit to get through. And you'd be hard pressed to find something that fit more hand in glove with the
with the Tech TV,
with the Tech TV aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Serial Experiments Lain was the show that justified running the Anime Unleashed block to begin with. There's aren't that many other shows that have whatever. That's enough about that. Lain is too complicated to talk about for a small segment in an episode in a multifaceted episode like this. Which is why we'll move right on to Technolize.
Oh shit!
Yeah. Do you have anything to say about Technolize?
This is a crunchy jawbreaker I have not broken into yet.
Yeah.
I'll get to it someday.
Yeah, I have seen
not now.
I have seen just a little bit. I've seen just enough of it to know that it's going to be this show's going to be a lot to take in. It's on my my ever so shrinking list of physical media backlog of anime. I need to get to it. I probably should have tried to watch a couple episodes before we recorded this.
It's funny if you look at the at this list, we go from Tenjo Tenge, Gunsword, Trigun, Lupin the Third, and then right in the middle, bam, 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 got Ergo Proxy, Paranoia Agent, Lain, Techno Lies.
I think
Holy shit.
I think this initial lineup may have been based off of conversations that I had with Hayden when he was trying to gather ideas for how to format the block. Maybe he took my opinions on focusing on this kind of content a little too
funny,
a little too strong.
Because once Techno Lies ends, you can see we're out of that territory into something completely different.
Yeah, Tokyo Underground and 3x3 Eyes, I think were two of the next shows to come up.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say that I may have never seen Techno Lies. I sure as hell saw Tokyo Underground.
What were your thoughts on Tokyo Underground?
It exists. And it has a good old-fashioned Vancouver dub.
Oh, it does. I actually was not aware of that.
It's got a good old Ocean Studios dub, whose Brad Swale is the main character.
Nice. It's always heartwarming to know that those exist. Actually, I don't think Tokyo Underground is in print in any form. So.
Oh, hell no.
But no one really seems to care about that one. I don't think it made a strong impression on a lot of people.
Yeah. 3x3 Eyes is one that I did not see. Again, on my list.
Yeah.
I'll get to it.
I do know that Greg Wiseman, the co-creator of Gargoyles and the guy behind Spectacular Spider-Man and Young Justice, he directed the dub for 3x3 Eyes, which is, which I always found interesting because it's not what he usually does. And so we're near the end of the list of the stuff that aired on TechTV, unless I missed something. I think I may have missed a couple titles. I should take this opportunity to point out that back around this time that this was airing, which was sort of like the golden age, burgeoning time for anime on North American TV, Brian Hansen was doing a column for Anime News Network called The Click, and that column has proven to be a lifesaver, because when I went back and read those entries that he did compiling everything that aired, he didn't only compile what was airing on American TV, he compiled what was airing on Canadian TV, which, for him would have been a monumental task that I don't think a lot of us appreciated that much at the time, but going back, man, it is so great that he was able to sort of capture what was going on in that era, because when I read those entries that he ran for what was going on in Anime Current at the time, like all the context of what was going on in that block just flooded back into my mind. It was great. Go if you want nostalgia for what was going on back in the late 2000s. If you're one of those people who just can't let it go back and read his column, The Click. It's good memories.
Oh, I don't even need to go read it now because I was reading it at the time he was writing it.
Oh yeah. Oh well, I mean, if you want a nostalgia kick now, you can go back and check it out. It's all there.
The thing I remember most vividly from reading that column was that wasn't Chrono Crusade on like Stars or something?
Yeah, Stars in the States.
Yeah. That's about like the only thing I remember. Oh, and I remember him making a huge deal out of the fact that Spirited Away got played on CBC.
I remember, yeah, CBC aired Spirited Away and chopped out 30 minutes of it.
Oh, what a fucking travesty that was.
Yeah, that's something I don't like talking about. It was so disheartening, especially since getting CBC to air anime continues to be a hill that I am determined to die on. But we don't have to talk about that today.
Yeah, charge bravely onto that hill. Requiem from the Darkness. Yes. I've seen the first 3 episodes of it. Keep meaning to go back to it. Maybe I'll save it for Halloween, marathon the rest of it. Decent little show. One of the few sort of horror anthology animes that exists.
Yeah, a bit of a weird, out of place choice for this block, but
Well, I wonder if you could look through and see what month it was airing. It could have been right for the time.
Yeah, maybe. I'd have to double check that, and I am too lazy to do that right now.
Fair enough.
And that brings us to the last new show that ran on the block, because I think everything after this was all reruns, and that was Black Lagoon. And oh man, it's unfortunate that Anime Current ended after this, but what a note to go out on. definitely the best. I think one of the best dubs that Ocean Studios produced.
Oh yeah,
No question.
going out on another Ocean's dub.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that this highlighted another problem that happened with TechTV is that the station is kind of even at this point, even when they were like putting effort into something like an anime block, the station was largely on autopilot in a lot of ways, especially with the way that they handled things like scheduling and ratings. Black Lagoon aired at the same time as the other stuff did at 8:30 p.m., so before Watershed. They made a couple attempts to edit some of the language, but it was futile because the F-bombs flowed freely on the air on that show, and it actually, despite the fact that
I could imagine a few strategically placed beeps even enhancing it a little bit.
maybe, yeah. I think I noticed that they tried to beep dialogue in a couple episodes, but they just forgot to bleep the majority of fucks, so it was completely pointless. And it still aired with an 18+, or no, it aired with a PG rating. I think a couple times they tried to get an 18+ rating on, and this is something that I emphasized to the programming team when I was in contact with them, is that make sure that you run an 18+ rating on Black Lagoon, and they usually didn't. Not that it was ever an issue, because of course not enough people were watching G4 Tech TV Canada to possibly care about the fact that Black Lagoon was running with a PG rating before Watershed. But there it was, in all its glory. Certainly more uncensored than it aired in the States, even though by the time it aired in the States on Adult Swim, it was pretty much, they were pretty much able to show it intact, except for the F-bombs, which I guess is still a significant part of the dub. But, yeah, it was really cool having that on the air, not too long after the dub was completed as well, if I recall correctly.
Oh yeah, and it's I'm looking at my first season singles discs of Black Lagoon on my shelf right now. It certainly helped to sell me on the show.
Okay, I guess we should point out why Anime Current ended, and it was due to the demise of Genion in late 2007.
Yes,
so
you had to get to that.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Genion was no more, and along with Genion went their sole distribution deal for anime, and apparently they tried to look into some other content, but nobody else could cut them as good a deal as Genion was willing to in getting that content out there. Apparently they had plans to air Hellsing Ultimate as well at some point, but that never materialized for some reason. I guess Genion went under before they were able to get materials to them, or something like that.
That would have been a weird airing, because it would have only been 3 episodes?
I think it was maybe 4 at that point. Yeah.
No, in 2008. Okay,
yeah.
maybe.
Maybe that was also a factor. They felt that it wasn't worth making the extra effort to get their hands on it, since it was incomplete, and would remain incomplete for another 8 years.
I do recall they ran those Hellsing Ultimate commercials a hell of a lot.
They used footage. They did have some footage from Hellsing Ultimate, which they spliced into their ads, but the show never actually showed up on the blog.
Okay, maybe that was just it. I saw it in their ad bumpers.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's not clear what happened there, but that was planned to be the follow-up to Black Lagoon, and it never happened. I think they just ran reruns.
It's a shame they couldn't have put just regular Hellsing out.
Yeah, maybe they could have. That one never showed up on Canadian TV, if I recall correctly, but that just never...
I certainly would have swapped Tokyo Underground out for Hellsing.
Yeah, some strange decisions with some of the shows they picked up, but I think it was any oddities were definitely offset by the stronger choices that they made. But yeah, after anime ended, G4 Tech TVs remained committed to running some other scripted content. Most notably was their adult digital distraction block, which where they licensed a bunch of Adult Swim titles after Teletoon fell into their default position of not caring about them. There was a very notable incident where they continued to run most of this content with, like, early in the day with a PG rating, including the incredibly violent Super Jail. Darwin O'Connor, who...
Oh, shit! That's where I saw Super Jail.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of, like, what shows were these that were on, and now you've triggered... Ah, shit. I do remember Super Jail running on there now.
How can you forget Super Jail? Darwin O'Connor, who used to contribute some stuff to the Zon in Canada boards, and I think he still pops around I Miss Bionics and a couple other places. He did an interesting experiment where he actually submitted a complaint to the CBSC over Super Jail airing with a PG rating on G4 Tech TV. He wasn't actually outraged by it. He just wanted to see what would happen, and because he just wanted to see. And apparently the process took almost a full year, and they assessed it and found that the show absolutely should have aired with an 18+ rating. I don't think, and the CBSC is completely. The CBSC is, as we discussed in the Power Rangers episode of this podcast a little while ago, is completely toothless and can't actually do anything. But I think G4 was able to basically get away with the explanation that it was a technical error, which it technically was, because they just weren't paying attention to how they were administering things like ratings, because they traditionally didn't have to worry about that due to the tech nature of their content. But hey, they wanted to get into scripted content, so I mean, I guess I can't defend them over that.
Man, and all this time I thought we were just cooler, and now you tell me it was bureaucratic laziness?
When it comes to Canadian television, don't attribute to coolness or innovation what you can attribute to bureaucratic oversights. Also, another thing that they aired was the IT Crowd, which was actually the first time I was exposed to that show. I didn't like it at first, but I went back and watched it a few years later, and I quite enjoyed it. I do think that Black Books is the better Grand Lineham show, but it was I think that was actually the North American premiere of the IT Crowd on G4 Tech TV Canada.
Again, good fit for the channel. And now that you're dredging up all these long lost memories, I am remembering now that we also got Code Monkeys.
Yes, they did run Code Monkeys on there as well. I have nothing to say about Code Monkeys.
I remember liking it at the time, and my sisters enjoyed it as well, but whether it holds up or not is something to be determined.
Yeah. Well, I am not going to determine it. I am okay with leaving Code Monkeys in the ether. I guess one thing you also wanted to discuss was what do you think were big missed opportunities on G4 Tech TV? I guess we've already kind of touched on this with things like Hellsing.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought we were going to discuss what was the one show that what was the one Genion title that you wish could have made it on. Okay.
Just sticking with Genion's back catalog. If you can pick one show that could have aired on Anime Current, what would you have picked?
Yeah, if I could have added one show to the list, it would have been Kamichu.
Kamichu?
Yeah. Have you ever seen that one?
I've seen just a little bit of it.
Yeah, fantastic show. It's almost like Ghibli-esque in like its themes, and it's another fantastic dub from the same studio that did the Read or Die TV dub, and I put in probably like top 10, one of the best dubs ever made for a TV anime.
Oh, well, that is quite a high endorsement, and I know you know your dubs well, Jarvis. If I were to pick one show that I wish could have run on Anime Current, it would absolutely be The Legend of Black Heaven, one of the most underappreciated titles in the Genion library, in my opinion. If you're not familiar with Legend of Black Heaven, you may have seen a clip on...
Oh, I've seen it.
Oh, I know you have, Jarvis. I was addressing the audience. Which I guess I should have made clearer. If you haven't heard of Legend of Black Heaven, you may have seen a clip on YouTube of like this... of this big black guy with a extremely inappropriate voice. So that's actually from The Legend of Black Heaven. It's a pretty janky show at times, and that scene illustrates that pretty well. But I think it's a really neat little comedy. It's about a salaryman who used to be in a rock band, some aliens come down and abduct him, and they realize that a song that he played back in his rock days is required to power one of their weapons in an intergalactic war. So he has to get the band together to power alien weapons, and I like it a lot. Hits the right chords for me.
Didn't that run on Adult Swim late night?
Nope, that one never ran on TV anywhere.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good show. So, I guess looking at the block overall, I think one of the things we should maybe discuss is how does Anime Current, or we'll expand it, how does G4 TechTV's anime lineup stack up with what we saw on other stations, like specifically Bionics or Razor's Kamikaze blog?
Well, I can speak a little bit to Bionics. And Bionics had a fantastic lineup, as I'm sure you're well aware. Things like Ghost in the Shell, 10 episodes of the Case Closed dub.
They aired 20 episodes of Case Closed.
I only saw 10.
They moved it to midnight after a certain point. It's worth pointing out that Case Closed was the one show on Bionics where they did not air all the episodes they licensed. They bought 26 and only aired 20. But I think it was a package deal with Full Metal Alchemist.
Yes, another show that, that Full Metal Alchemist airing was so good. That was appointment, TV for me. And that was a 1-2 punch with Gundam Seed and Full Metal Alchemist. Bionics, fantastic lineup. But honestly, for, adult shows with adult themes, you really can't beat the Anime Current lineup, at all. I don't think anything can even touch it for that.
Yeah, it was. You're right. It was definitely a much more adult lineup for sure. And one of the things about Bionics, even if it had kept going, it still felt like we wouldn't have seen a lot of the stuff that showed up on other networks like Adult Swim on there. I couldn't see something like Blood Plus showing up on Bionics or anything comparable.
Yeah, but we did get Ghost in the Shell standalone complex.
That was an exception.
Yeah, I watched the reruns of Standalone Complex every time, hoping against hope that we would get second gig, but we never did.
We never did.
Yeah, I eventually had to shell out something like $300 for the single, DVDs for that show, back before box sets were a thing.
And based on the quality of the Blu-ray release that we got from Anchor Bay recently, you're probably better off sticking with those DVDs as well.
Yep, gonna have to track down that art box somewhere and just slip them in there.
Yeah, you can buy it on Steam apparently. But so overall, I think when you have titles like Standalone Complex and Full Metal Alchemist and Eureka 7 on Bionics, it's kind of hard to compete with that. But Anime Current you have Paranoia Agent at that alone. I gotta give it praise for that. And of course,
for 5 shows on any other network.
Yeah, and uncensored nudity and swearing. That definitely gives major points to Anime Current.
Mm-hmm. Although looking at the Anime Unleashed, block on the American side, I do have to call out 2 shows in particular: Magical Shopping Arcade Abenobashi, and Razafon. 2 shows that when I was making my rankings, I was ranking everything on a 1 to 5 system. I gave each of those shows a 10.
On a 1 to 5 system.
On a 1 to 5 system.
So, obviously, in its final years, G4 kind of fell apart. It was falling apart even before the U.S. station closed its doors in 2014. But, it...
What, you mean reruns of Campus PD and Man Tracker weren't bringing them in?
It was a total zombie station for its last few years, and the only reason it existed was to rake in subscriber fees from being packaged with other channels. And now that that's less viable than it was before, I guess it just finally reached a point where Rogers found it was unprofitable to keep it going. Granted, the fact that they were able to find it profitable to keep it going for so long is really telling about how cable works in Canada. But
they must have just been squatting on that channel.
Oh yeah, it was one of the most notorious channels for that. The Biography channel, which Rogers owned, their tactic was to turn that into Viceland and rebrand it, and actually get Canadian production going and then or have production made in Canada to make the Canadian version of the station viable and then export it to the U.S., which is a really, really interesting tactic, even though apparently things aren't going too hot for that station right now. The trend is still to rebrand these stations, but with G4, they just got rid of it, and that's something that I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of in the future. We'll have to see. But yeah, do you think that if they had a vision for G4 Tech TV, do you think that something like that could even have been viable anymore at this point? Their gaming program had kind of fallen apart, and I don't know. I don't think that there really is a place for a Tech TV anymore, or that kind of content as much as we like to look back on it. What do you think, Jarvis?
Oh, it's dead. It's never been more dead for something like Tech TV to exist. YouTube killed it. You just can't have something like Tech TV in a world where, as soon as a review goes out, it's already obsolete.
Yeah. Apparently Victor Lucas from Electric Playground pitched rebranding the station as Electric Playground Network, but that got shot down.
I miss Victor. I wonder what he's doing right now.
He was on Twitter, so I'm not sure what he's up to. Yeah.
If they had the foresight to have like a late night, Dungeons and Dragons sort of, programming block, getting some interesting people playing. I don't even play Dungeons and Dragons, and I would tune in like hell for that.
I'm surprised no one has tried doing that yet. But I guess that would depend entirely on the personalities.
I just don't think you could convince anybody to put up the money for that, unless you got like Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro to shell out buckets of money for it. No TV station is going to want to bet their dollars on that bringing people in.
Are you talking about like just filming people playing Dungeons and Dragons at a table? Because I mean, like the low cost of doing that would probably maybe make it worth considering.
I mean, I can listen to my brother and his friends talk about their D&D campaign, for hours. Then again, they're doing crazy shit, so you would have to.
That might be better suited for a podcast or a radio program.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. And also worth mentioning, I know I mentioned that Viceland is one of the stations run by Rogers right now, and they're kind of, it's not going quite as well as they expected to, but the UK version of Viceland has started an anime block, and after things kind of fell apart with Anime Current on G4, I guess it's probably unlikely that they'd want to Rogers would want to take a chance with anime on Viceland, but hey, I think that would be worth a shot for sure. It's not as good as getting it on CBC for sure, but if they wanted to take a chance on it, I would totally watch that.
Man, something just popped into my head now. I wonder if this is crazy, but just hear me out. I wonder if Crunchyroll...
crazy proposals for things like anime on TV are totally what this show is all about.
Okay, I wonder if Crunchyroll could be convinced to, buy a programming block and run things.
Well, they kind of did that once. Do you remember their Crunchyroll Christmas special from a couple years ago?
That was on TV? I thought that was just... Shit! I did not know that.
What they did was they actually purchased brokered time, like time that's usually reserved for infomercials, and they ran the Christmas special as a half-hour infomercial on various shows, and they bought the time they specifically bought the time on stations like Spike TV so that it would show up on Canadian network, or so that Canadians could watch it on TV as well, because many cable carriers still carry Spike TV as well.
I guess that makes sense. You can't really call yourself a true Christmas special unless you make it on proper TV.
But hey, maybe there's something to that tactic. Maybe Crunchyroll can just imitate what they've been doing for years in Japan, which is basically just running anime as brokered content on it. Actually, that was a Sci-Fi Network when they had an anime block running in the States about 7 or 8 years ago. That was a brokered block.
I remember. I did not get that on our side, but it had some good shows on there.
We did not get it up here. In fact, I think a lot of that content showed up on Super Channel, which I'm willing to bet that fewer people in Canada have access to Super Channel than they did to the U.S. version of the Sci-Fi Network, which is not available here. But yeah, I think when you're looking at that particular time period, a lot of stuff can be encapsulated in that time. And Anime Current overall, I think, is a pretty good summation of kind of what was going on, what people expected from anime on TV, and what stations were, at that time willing to deliver. And I think it's a cool thing to look back on for sure. It's sad that G4 has shut down, but I think it's definitely gone past its expiration point at this time. So at least we'll have their anime offerings to look back on for years to come.
Yeah, no, when I think it was you mentioning on Twitter that G4 was going away, and I had to think, wait, G4 is still around?
Yep, that's the appropriate reaction. Okay, Jarvis, I think that wraps us up for today. Big thanks for coming on the show, and thanks to everyone for tuning into Zonan Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at Zonan Canada or email zonancanada@gmail.com. And Jarvis, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me at Jarvis_Gray, where I will be talking about the often terrible anime that I'm watching, and sometimes the very occasional good anime. Mostly terrible, though.
Yeah, check him out, and that is Gray, spelled Gray as well.
That's correct.
Theme song is by Ultraclystron. That can be found on his album Packet Flood, which you can buy at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or your podcast app of choice, and leave a rating or review if you have a chance. We'd really appreciate it. If you know anyone who might like this show, please recommend it to them. See you again!